I've been working night security for about 5 years now. You get used to the silence. Honestly, start to like it. It pays better than retail, and usually the only thing you have to fight is the urge to fall asleep. 3 months ago, I picked up a contract for a logistics center just outside of Portland. It was one of those massive Amazon-style warehouses, but half of it was currently empty, waiting for new tenants. My job was just to sit in the booth, watch the monitors, and do a perimeter walk every 2 hours. The first 2 weeks were boring, standard stuff, but on a Tuesday, around 3 a.m., the motion sensor in Sector 4 tripped. Sector 4 is the deepest part of the warehouse. It's a dead end. There are no doors leading outside from there, just concrete walls and empty shelving racks. I looked at the monitor. It was staticky, old equipment, but I could clearly see the aisle was empty. I reset the alarm. Maybe a rat or a moth landed on the lens. 10 seconds later, it tripped again. I sighed, grabbed my flashlight, and left the booth. The walk to Sector 4 takes about 5 minutes. It's creepy walking through a building that size when it's pitch black, but like I said, you get used to it. When I got to the aisle, nothing was there, just dust. I shined my light up at the sensor to see if a spider had built a web over it. It was clean. I radioed back to base, just a habit, even though no one was listening, and said, "Sector 4 clear, false alarm." I turned around to walk back to the booth. That's when I heard it. It came from the other side of the shelving unit. It was the sound of rubber, like the squeak of a sneaker pivoting on polished concrete. I froze. "Hello?" I called out. "Security, you need to come out." Silence. Then I heard it again, but it wasn't a footstep. It was a mimic. Someone, or something, whispered my own voice back to me. "Security, you need to come out." It wasn't an echo. The tone was completely flat, no emotion, like a recording being played at the wrong speed. I didn't investigate. Every instinct in my body screamed, "Run." I speed-walked back to the booth, locked the door, and stared at the monitors. I pulled up the feed for Sector 4. My heart stopped. There was a man standing in the middle of the aisle. He was facing the wall, just standing there, perfectly still. He was wearing the exact same security uniform I was wearing. I watched, trembling, as the figure on the screen slowly turned its head toward the camera. The face, it wasn't right. It was blurry, like a smudge where features should be. It looked into the lens, and then the motion sensor on my booth door tripped. I was in the booth. The monitor showed the figure in Sector 4, but the handle of the door 3 feet away from me was jiggling violently. I hid under the desk and called 911. I stayed there until the police kicked the door in. They searched the whole building. Sector 4 was empty. The footage I saw? The drive was corrupted. It just showed static. I quit the next morning. I don't know what was in that warehouse, but I know one thing for sure. When I heard that voice mimic me in the dark, it sounded hungry. My girlfriend and I decided to save some money by renting a cheap Airbnb for our anniversary. It was a small cabin up in the Poconos. The listing had good reviews, but it was definitely older than the pictures made it look. We got there around 9 p.m. on a Friday. It was already dark. The key was in a lockbox by the door, just like the host, a guy named Marcus, had messaged us. We unpacked, made some dinner, and settled in to watch a movie. Around midnight, Sarah went to bed, but I stayed up to finish a beer. The cabin was dead silent except for the settling noises old houses make. I was scrolling on my phone when I heard a distinct click come from the kitchen. It sounded like a door latch opening. I walked into the kitchen. There was a narrow door next to the fridge that I assumed was a pantry. It had been shut when we arrived. Now it was cracked open about an inch. I felt a cold draft coming from it. I pulled it open, expecting shelves of canned food, but it was a staircase leading down into a pitch-black basement. I didn't remember the listing mentioning a basement. I figured the latch was just loose and the draft blew it open. I pushed the door shut until it clicked, locked the deadbolt on it, and went to bed. At 3 a.m. I woke up because the bed was shaking, not an earthquake. It was subtle, like someone was bumping into the frame. I opened my eyes. Sarah was fast asleep next to me. The room was dark, but the hallway light was on. I hadn't left the hallway light on. I sat up, my heart pounding in my ears. I looked toward the bedroom doorway. Standing in the hallway just out of the light was a man. He was tall, wearing a dirty flannel shirt, and he was holding a ring of keys. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the floor, breathing heavily through his nose. I shouted, "Hey!" as loud as I could. The man didn't jump. He didn't run. He just slowly looked up at me, smiled, a wide, unnatural smile, and then turned and casually walked back toward the kitchen. I jumped out of bed, slammed the bedroom door, and locked it. I woke Sarah up and we climbed out the bedroom window. We ran to the car without shoes on and drove to the nearest gas station to call the cops. When the police arrived at the cabin, the front door was still locked from the inside, but the kitchen door, the one leading to the basement, was wide open. The police found a sleeping bag and food wrappers in the basement, but the creepiest part was what they found on the basement stairs. The deadbolt on the kitchen door hadn't been picked. It had been unscrewed from the inside. Whoever that was, he hadn't broken in. He was already down there when we arrived. This happened when I was in college. I used to drive home on weekends to do laundry and get a free meal from my parents. The drive is about 2 hours, mostly through back roads in rural Ohio. It was late November, so it got dark early. I was driving a beat-up Honda Civic that struggled to get over 60 miles per hour. Around 10 p.m., I turned onto Route 9. It's a 2-lane road with 0 streetlights surrounded by cornfields on both sides. I was the only car on the road for about 20 minutes. Then, I saw headlights appear in my rear-view mirror. They were coming up fast. I was doing the speed limit, maybe a little over, but this guy must have been doing 90. I braced myself, expecting him to fly past me. Instead, he slammed on his brakes right as he got to my bumper. He didn't pass. He just sat there, tailgating me so close I couldn't even see his headlights anymore, just the glow. I tapped my brakes to signal him to back off. Nothing. I sped up a little. He sped up. Then he turned on his high beams. Because he was so close and his truck was lifted, the light flooded my entire car. I was blinded. I flipped my rearview mirror down, but the side mirrors were reflecting the light right into my eyes. I started to panic. I thought maybe I had cut him off earlier and this was road rage. For 5 miles he did this, tailgating, high beams on. Then, suddenly, he turned his high beams off and dropped back about 10 car lengths. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. But then, he did something weird. He flashed his high beams. Once, twice, 3 times. He did it again a few seconds later. Flash, flash, flash. I looked at my dashboard. Was my trunk open? Was I leaking gas? I saw a gas station coming up on the right. It was closed, but the lights were on under the canopy. I decided to pull over and let this psycho pass. I signaled and turned into the gas station lot. To my horror, the truck turned in right behind me. I didn't stop. I circled the pumps and drove right back onto the main road. The truck followed me. My phone had 0 service. I was 20 minutes from the nearest town. I floored it, pushing my old Honda as hard as it would go. The truck stayed right with me, flashing his lights every 30 seconds. Finally, I saw the lights of the town. I drove straight to the police station. I pulled into the lot, jumped out of the car, and ran toward the door. The truck pulled in behind me. The driver's door opened. A massive guy stepped out. He held his hands up. "Lock your doors," he screamed at me. "Get inside and lock your doors." I stopped, confused. "What?" "There's someone in your back seat," he yelled. I was flashing my lights every time I saw him sit up. I froze. I looked back at my car. The back seat was empty, but the rear passenger door was hanging wide open. While I was running to the police station door, whoever had been hiding in the back of my car had slipped out and ran into the darkness. I never saw who it was, but the truck driver told the police the man had a knife. I had driven 2 hours with a stranger breathing down my neck, and if that truck driver hadn't blinded him with high beams every time he tried to make a move, I probably wouldn't be here today.
I've always been the type of person who prefers trees to people. There's something about the deep isolation of the woods that resets my brain. So, last October, I decided to do a 3-day solo hiking trip into the Blackwood Ridge area in northern Minnesota. This isn't a state park with paved paths and rangers selling firewood. This is deep wilderness. No cell service, no GPS signal, and you're lucky if you see another human being once you pass the trailhead. I hiked about 7 miles in on the first day. The weather was perfect. Crisp, cool air, and the leaves were just starting to turn orange. I found a clearing near a small creek around 5 p.m. and decided to set up camp. I'm experienced at this. I hung my food bag up in a tree to keep bears away, set up my single-person tent, and got a small fire going. I ate my freeze-dried dinner, watching the sun go down. It was peaceful. By 9 p.m., the fire was dying down to embers. The woods went pitch black. If you've never been in deep woods at night, you don't realize how dark it actually gets. You can't see your hand in front of your face without a flashlight. I was just about to crawl into my tent when I heard it. It was a whistle. It was faint, coming from somewhere deep in the tree line to my north. It wasn't a bird. It was a melody. Someone was whistling Yankee Doodle. It was slow, deliberate, and horribly out of tune. I sat up straight, freezing in place. I was 7 miles from the nearest road. I hadn't seen a single car at the trailhead. The idea that someone was out here, walking in the pitch black without a flashlight, because I would have seen the beam, was impossible. The whistling stopped. "Hello?" I called out. My voice cracked a little. "Is anyone out there?" Silence. Just the sound of the creek bubbling nearby. I grabbed my hatchet, it was the only weapon I had, and sat by the dying fire, listening. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. I convinced myself it was the wind whistling through a hollow tree, or maybe my mind playing tricks on me because of the isolation. I kicked dirt over the fire to extinguish it and crawled into my tent. I zipped the door shut, climbed into my sleeping bag, and laid there, clutching the hatchet. I eventually drifted off to sleep. I woke up at what I later found out was 2:43 a.m. I didn't know what woke me up at first. The woods were dead silent. No crickets, no wind. Then I heard the sound of a zipper. It wasn't my zipper. It was the sound of a tent zipper, slowly, methodically being pulled down. But here's the thing. I was in the tent. The zipper to the rainfly was closed. I realized with a jolt of adrenaline that the sound wasn't coming from my tent. It was coming from about 20 feet away. I slowly unzipped the mesh of my window, just an inch, and peered out. The moon had come out, so there was a little bit of blue light filtering through the canopy. About 20 yards from my campsite, in a patch of tall grass I hadn't checked earlier, there was another tent. It looked old. The fabric was faded green, covered in mold. It looked like it had been there for years. And standing in front of it was a figure. It was a tall, gaunt man. He was wearing tattered clothes that hung off in like rags. He was facing away from me, staring down at the old tent. I watched, terrified to even breathe, as he slowly turned his head toward my tent. He didn't turn his body, just his neck. He lifted his hand and pointed a finger right at me. Then he started whistling again. Yankee Doodle. He took a step toward me, then another. He wasn't rushing. He was sauntering, like he had all the time in the world. I didn't think. I didn't pack up. I grabbed my keys and my flashlight, slashed the back of my tent open with a hatchet, and I ran. I ran through the dark woods, tripping over roots, getting whipped in the face by branches. I could hear him behind me. He wasn't running. He was walking, heavy, crunching footsteps. And that whistling, it never got breathless. It just kept getting closer. I ran until my lungs burned. I must have run 3 miles in the dark before I found the main trail. I didn't stop until I saw the sunrise. I made it back to my car around 8 a.m. I drove straight to the ranger station. 2 rangers went back out with me later that day. We found my campsite. My tent was shredded, not by an animal. It had been slashed to ribbons with a knife. My sleeping bag was pulled out and thrown in the creek. But the other tent, the moldy green one I saw, it was there. But when the rangers examined it, they found it was staked into the ground with bone shards. And inside, it wasn't empty. I won't describe what was in there, but the rangers told me that the tent had likely been there for months. I had set up my camp 20 yards away from a shallow grave, and the man guarding it had been watching me since I arrived.
A signal is going dark for tonight. If these stories kept you company in the dark, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a transmission. Do you have a story that belongs on this frequency? A glitch in your reality or a night shift gone wrong? Send it to the email on your screen or in the description below. Until next time, you are now disconnected.